I let out a scream and fell to the floor as onlookers turned to stare. For a moment, I hardly realized that scream had come from me as the agony advanced. But it wasn't the pain from my collapsed knee. It was everything that I'd held inside, finally being released as my life unraveled. That was the beginning of the end of my old life. Everything changed after that. It was an abrupt end to an after-work step class on the day of my 31st birthday. But that in itself wasn't a life-changing event. That scream that I let out in that class on that day, it opened the floodgates. It gave me permission to feel the things that I'd been holding back behind a wall. It allowed me to give voice to my unhappiness and to finally admit I couldn't be this person. This was not my life. There had to be another way. You see, up until then, I'd been quote-unquote successful. I'd settled down in my dream house by the beach with the man who loved me. I had a good job, company car, nice holidays. But despite the successful life, I felt like there was a hole in my soul. I was busy doing all the things I thought I should, trying to please people, always saying yes. I wanted to gain approval and be perfect. I was aspiring to be Superwoman. I was striving, but never quite arriving. I should be happy. Shouldn't I be grateful? Why wasn't this enough? But nothing gave me joy anymore. I hit a wall. The tank was empty. I couldn't get out of bed for weeks, but I felt guilty for being there. I felt like I'd let everyone down. And that's how my new life started. I turned my back on the corporate career I'd trained all my life for. The good job, the money, the car. I left my partner of 7 years and dream house by the beach, and I went to figure out another way. I lived in yoga ashrams. I taught English to Buddhist monks, and I spent time learning from other cultures. Now, we don't all have to quit our jobs and head for the hills. It's not necessary to go to these extremes to learn the lessons that I'm going to share. This was just my path. It allowed me to wipe the slate clean, to slow down, take stock of who I was and what I wanted. Ram Dass said, "The quieter you become, the more you can hear." And away from the to-do lists, social media, and the constant overachieving, I could hear my inner voice for the first time. And it turns out, it had a lot to tell me. Busyness is fashionable. We wear busy like a badge of honor. It means we're needed, valuable, successful. Our attachment to busy has become a marker of our self-worth, and we cling to it. This was me. Is it you or someone you know? When I was in Bhutan, a kingdom famous for gross national happiness in place of gross domestic product, I was on a hike in the beautiful Himalayan mountains, and I asked a much older but more nimble monk, "How far is it to the top?" "It's better to travel well than to arrive," he told me. I.e., slow down, enjoy the view. But our attachment to busy means we no longer value the opposite of busy. We see downtime as a waste of time. Do you feel selfish or guilty for taking time out for you? Even though it's not just you that benefits. Imagine what a better partner, parent, worker, person you are when you're not stressed out and tired. I know that everyone in my house benefits when I've had a good night's sleep. It's a concept I refer to as slowing down to speed up, which I know sounds counterintuitive, but bear with me. If we slow down, make time for self-care, and take time out, what we find is we become more effective and therefore speed up. Because tasks don't take as long. Decisions are easier to make. Problems are easier to solve. We can think more clearly, and we make less mistakes. It's this concept of slowing down that then enables us to speed up and to travel well. Self-care for me is an early night, yoga, meditation, and walking the dog. But it's less about what we do, because we're all different, and more about making sure we press pause in our busy days. Self-care is critical in helping us offset this superhero complex. But it's as much about what we don't do as what we do. So saying no, setting good boundaries, and asking for support. As people pleasers, we can struggle with this. I always needed to do it all by myself, and that I thought if I asked for support, it'd be seen as a sign of weakness. It's something that's especially difficult for women. As equality has evolved in the developed world, we've had more opportunities, yet with it more challenges, more roles to fulfill. We can have it all these days, but it seems to come with a side of burnout. We're smashing glass ceilings, raising families, and still making sure we look and feel great. But we don't. We feel anxious, exhausted, overwhelmed and overscheduled. It's this Superwoman complex that sets us up to fail. We want to do it all, and of course, we want to do it all perfectly. And then when we can't, we feel like we failed. According to the UN, women globally still do 3 times more unpaid care work than men. And this is often in addition to our paid jobs. Now, I'm in a same-sex relationship, so it's not about blue jobs and pink jobs at home. There are just jobs. And we both work, so we split them 50-50. But shouldn't that be the case regardless of gender? Putting you first is a marker of your self-worth, and it gives us the energy to achieve our potential. We also have to believe that we have potential in the first place and decide who it is we want to be. Wait, you mean there's a choice? This was a revelation to me. When I first heard Brené Brown say that authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who you think you should be and embracing who you truly are, I realized that I spent my whole life trying to fit this mold. And now here you are telling me I didn't need to, that it wasn't my mold. We get to create our own mold and define what success looks like for us. But as a good woman, I thought I needed to settle down with a man, get a good job, do everything asked of me, even if it wasn't what I wanted, without ever complaining. I had a massive case of the shoulds my whole life. And I didn't want to be the odd one out, not conforming. When I was in northern Thailand teaching English to Buddhist monks, I was privileged to learn probably far more from them than they did from me, including this passage that stuck with me. Believe your own truth. Walk your own path. However, they also tried to convince me that seeing snakes was good luck and meant that I'd marry a man. Both of those things terrify me. Walking my own path involved facing a lot of fear, including returning to the rural conservative Christian village I grew up in to come out, to tell those who'd known me all my life that they didn't know the real me at all. Once I'd got to know myself and spent time looking after myself, I then had to develop self-belief in who I was. And that's when I first encountered a term for something I've experienced all my life: imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is an inability to internalize our accomplishments and a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. It sounds like one of these days they're going to realize that I'm not as good as they think. It leads us to downplay our achievements, wave away praise and recognition, putting it down to luck or a mistake or some other external factor. It's the domain of high achievers, and according to the International Journal of Behavioral Science, 70% of us get it, regardless of gender. I remember this voice playing in my mind at book launches and TV interviews. Who are you to be posing as an expert? It was the same voice that had plagued my corporate career, and the promotions didn't seem to help. In fact, the higher the bar was raised, the further I felt I had to fall, and the harder I needed to work to prove myself. It's not something we talk about, particularly at work. And let's face it, it's pretty career limiting to admit to your new boss that you think they've made a mistake and you're not actually as good as they think you are. So we're left feeling like it's a character flaw that only we have, further evidencing this feeling of not being good enough. Now, I liken it to a volume control on a stereo. It's not that we turn it off, but we can control how loud the voice gets. Here's 3 tools to help. Know your strengths, celebrate your success, and let go of perfect to embrace failure. Let me ask you, what are you good at? Do you know your strengths? For many years, I wasn't sure I had any strengths. I certainly wasn't in the habit of promoting them. You see, the trouble with strengths is we think if we're good at it, so is everybody else. So it's nothing special. We also live in a culture that's encouraged to be modest. We fear boasting or being a tall poppy. We're not taught to think about our strengths. We do spend far too much time thinking about our weaknesses. Our brains have this negativity bias. We're wired to scan the horizon for the worst that can happen. That's how we survived. But what that translates into nowadays is what we don't like about ourselves when we look in the mirror and the things we're not good at. We also need to celebrate our success more. So often we're on to the next thing, or we're worrying about what we haven't done yet, or what others have done better, that we forget about the small wins along the way. The next time someone gives you praise or recognition, if the only thing you can say is thanks, it's a really good start. Own it, acknowledge it, and it will help offset this negativity bias. But I was lost in this quest for perfection. If it wasn't perfect, then it wasn't success. But perfect is imperfect. That's part of being human. And if we aim for something unachievable, we will always fall short. I remember my partner coming home when Jacinda Ardern became Prime Minister. She was worried that her parents might be disappointed because she was the same age and she wasn't Prime Minister. I will never look like that airbrushed photo in a magazine. My life will never seem as perfect as somebody else's social media highlights reel. As humans, failure is inevitable and something we need to give ourselves permission to do. But we've associated failure with proof we're not good enough, so we avoid it at all costs. I used to think that if I avoided failure, I'd be successful by default. And then I started my own business, and through lots of trial and error, failure became a regular companion. My first royalty check was worth less than $5. My first events were free. Sometimes no one would show up. But did I learn a lot about events and marketing and the world of publishing? When I gave myself permission to fail, I learned that that's how we succeed. 3 books later, and sellout events sprinkled with failings and learnings along the way, life's not perfect, but it's mine. And these lessons, they've allowed me to walk my own path and to travel well, to know myself, make time for myself, believe in myself, and to finally let go of this pursuit of Superwoman. I learned that when we let go of perfect, what we find is that we're still pretty amazing as we are. That when we slow down, we become more effective and speed up. That we don't have to fit a mold, we get to create our own. No one is you, and that is your power. So know your strengths, celebrate your success, prioritize you, ask for support, and stop trying to be Superwoman, because you are enough as you are.